Hey everyone, it's Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel. Glad you could be with me today. Today I've got another product review for you. Actually, it's a recommendation or two for two books that I highly recommend for mixing and mastering songs. These are two books that I feel pretty passionately about. Every mixing engineer and songwriter, producer should have on their bookshelf. The first is The Mixing Engineer's Handbook by Bobby Owsinski. It's, by now you've probably heard of it. It's a classic and it's used by all the major music schools and music production schools and mixing and audio engineering schools. Probably sold a gazillion copies and everything. And we're going to go into it a little bit. And the second book that I highly recommend is Mixing Secrets by Mike Sr. Now, Mike Sr. is a guy who graduated from Cambridge University, went to London and was hired as a mixing engineer, mixed a few albums for some bands in London, but then decided to return to Cambridge and work on the staff of Sound on Sound, where he does a column. It's called the Mix Rescue column, Sound on Sound online. You should check it out. So first, let's get into the Bobby Owsinski book. You know, I've taken quite a few courses from Bobby Owsinski and bought quite a few publications. I'm also a member of Bobby Owsinski's Hitmakers Club, where you get to share your songs and critique each other's songs, and he will critique songs as well. Now, Bobby Owsinski is, as I mentioned, a pretty well-known name in the music education industry. He's written over 20 books on music production, mixing, recording, surround sound, and promotion. So these days he's also getting really into like social media and how you can use it to promote your band or whatever you do in music, essentially. He's worked on some famous acts over the years, such as Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Zappa, Lou Rawls, Willie Nelson, Elvis, I guess posthumously on some projects, I would think, Neil Young, Iron Maiden, The Ramones, Chicago, and also Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones. Now, parenthetically, Time Waits for No One has one of my all-time favorite guitar solos played by Mick Taylor. The song appears on the Rolling Stones album that came out in 1974, It's Only Rock and Roll. And it actually was the first track recorded on the album. You know, interestingly, it was Mick Taylor's last album that he did with the Rolling Stones, and the song was never really performed live by the Rolling Stones. Of course, the song has been performed by Mick Taylor live, but never by the Rolling Stones. You know, there was supposedly some sort of tension between Keith Richards and Mick Taylor. They didn't really get along, and eventually Keith Richards succeeded in basically convincing Mick Jagger that Mick Taylor should no longer be a member of the Stones. Having said that, Mick Taylor's guitar solo in Time Waits for No One is one of my all-time favorites. The solo goes on for quite a while, but indeed that's kind of like what makes it so special. It really takes you somewhere. Also, you want to pay attention to pianist Nicky Hopkins, who has a couple of beautiful accompanying runs that sort of flourish up and down the keyboard there. Really a beautiful song, and not your typical Rolling Stones song by any stretch of the imagination. Getting back to Bobby, he happens to be highly experienced, as you can imagine. He's like a walking Rolodex of a who's who in the music industry. He lives in LA, and he knows like every big name in the business over there. Like I was once corresponding with him, mentioning the fact that I had seen a video with Al Schmidt miking this jazz band, and he was like, oh yeah, I just had lunch with him. I meet with him every month downtown LA or something. I'm like, oh my God, this guy like knows really important people in the industry. Now, Al Schmidt, as you may recall, is a guy who is like the miking, recording, tracking guru, demigod, who has recorded everyone from Duke Ellington to Frank Sinatra and George Benson, you name it. And you should check out Al Schmidt as well. He's got some wonderful material. He's got a new book out, I believe, on Amazon about his experiences. It really summarizes quite a bit of his approach. And I think these days especially, a guy like Al Schmidt is an incredible resource because, you know, we're flooded with all these plugins and resources and digital this, digital that, all this hardware and stuff. And the wonderful thing about Al Schmidt is that he like really understands how to keep things simplified, minimalist, and sounding awesome. Check out some of his stuff. Anyway, so getting back to this thing, yeah, Bobby knows like everybody, and so he's a great resource. So if he's the kind of guy who's very helpful, and he'll actually help you out. He's a good person to know. Okay, so as far as the book is concerned, I highly recommend having classic books like this one and the Mike Senior book on your bookshelf, because there's nothing like having all this information sort of organized for you and in a step-by-step logical sequence. Everything from getting the big idea in mind, the arrangement, getting the sound, what to look for when you're mixing and producing music, to getting tips on how to use all these plugins and what have you. And then the back of the book, he's got like 24 interviews with some of the best mixing engineers in the business. And they really share some key insights to, tips and what are they looking for when they're mixing songs for these artists. And you've got some big time mixing engineers here like, Joe Ciccarelli, DiCarlo, Jimmy Douglas, Benny Facone, Jerry Finn, John Gass, Nathaniel Kunkel, George Massenberg, Dave Pensato, Andrew Sheps, Ken Scott, Ed Say, Don Smith, Bruce Swedian, Robert Orton, and the list goes on and on. I mean, you'll never get tired reading and rereading some of these interviews. Bobby really knows how to condense complicated information and distill it into something pragmatic and useful. For these reasons, I highly recommend that you check out this book, as well as some of the other books that he's produced. You can find his courses and educational material on BobbyOwsinskiCourses.com. And Bobby also has a very interesting blog, which has quite a few visitors you may want to check out. It's the Bobby Owsinski Music Production Blog.com. Again, as I mentioned, I'm a member of the Hitmakers Club, which isn't that expensive. It's an annual membership fee. You could pay monthly, I guess. And 101 Mixing Tips is a very good resource also to have. It's like a fixed price thing. You pay like $180 or something. And it's like 101 short video clips on, how to use reverb to do this, or how to record acoustic guitars better, vocal tips, using this or that delay, and how to integrate compression and equalization and all these plugins and tips and things to make your music sound really good. Okay, so I highly recommend that you check out Bobby Owsinski's educational materials. It's pretty much everywhere. You can't miss it. And he's a really cool guy. And now the second book that I highly recommend is Mixing Secrets by Mike Senior. I gotta say, this is an awesome book to have. I mean, this is another one of those you gotta have on your shelf type of books. And Lord knows, with all the courses out there, and I've probably taken at least 5 to 7 courses on mixing, not to mention all the memberships that I've joined over the years, and, with all these star mixers and everything like that. And some of these websites are awesome, these like masterclass programs and puremix.net and all these superb information. You can always learn a ton from all of them. But I also believe that it's very useful to have everything condensed in a book, where you can like go back and reread things and highlight, like every other page here I've got like highlighted information. It really encapsulates or distills things in your mind, because as you know, the mixing process can get just incredibly confusing right from the get-go. It can, unless you've done this like a million times, then you can get pretty lost in the process. And this book is primarily for the small studio mixing engineer, which is a category that I fall into. And I really got to say, this is the Bible for small studio mixers and producers. As mentioned earlier, Mike Senior is a highly experienced mixer himself, and he's done like, hundreds of rescue mixes as chief editor of the Sound on Sound Mix Rescue column. And Mike Senior also integrates interviews that he's either done himself or read about from some great mixing engineers like Michael Brower, Jakir King, Chris Lord-Alge, Tom Lord-Alge, Tony Maserati, Manny Marican, Andy Wallace, and the list goes on and on. So this book is also filled with quotes and references to their style of mixing as well. This is practical material. This is not theoretical. And I will guarantee that if you buy a book like this and the Owsinski book, you will come out being a much, much better mixing engineer, because it's going to show you how to avoid some of the worst habits you can develop and how to stay on track and look at it from the top, side, bottom, every which way, and yet not go crazy in the process. I'd also like to mention that this book comes with links to some online resources that are great. So for example, at the end of each chapter, you actually have 2 or 3 assignments. You're supposed to go out to the resource website and listen to some examples and also formulate your own opinions. And there are also some downloadable WAV files from tracks, multi-tracks from sessions that he's talking about and referring to in the book. So it's not just theoretical, it's really hands-on, and he's really asking you to get in there and get your hands dirty and try out a few techniques that he's explained in the chapters. And there are also references to some previous articles that he's written from the Sound on Sound magazine, some mix rescue sessions that you can listen to, the before and afters. And like Bobby Owsinski, Mike Sr. has also written a book on tracking and recording. It's called Recording Secrets. Mike has a Patreon page that for a minimal fee you can become a member of, and you get first access to some interesting videos that he's produced and articles that he's written to help you hone your mixing engineering skills. But I got to say from personal experience that after I read this book, and I made sure I read it and reread it at least 2 or 3 times, I only have the greatest thing to say. I am a better mixer now. I understand a lot more than I did looking from the top down, looking from the bottom up. And he'll explain to you the advantages and disadvantages of taking this particular route or another and help clarify some of the more mystical aspects of mixing. Okay, so I just wanted to read you an excerpt from Mike Sr.'s book here. I'm on page 124, Mix Preparation, Comping, and Arrangement. And he's talking about keeping things simple and minimalist, kind of like along the lines of an Al Schmidt type of approach to things. This simple piece of advice from Jack Joseph Puig, echoing an almost identical comment from Wycliffe Jean, quote, "You have to consider the fact that the ear can process only 3 things at once. When you get to the 4th thing, the attention drops away somewhere. So listen to your track and try to isolate which 3 elements should be the focus of attention at every point in the music. Any part that isn't one of these 3 main components is a candidate for pruning. Let's say that there's an acoustic guitar part strumming away throughout your track. Perhaps you should consider taking it out of your verses so that more important drum, piano, and vocal parts can come through more clearly. Save it for adding some external textural interest. So if you try to cut out as much of the less interesting stuff as possible, then you will generate some gaps in the texture for other subordinate parts to have their place in the sun." He goes on to say, as Hugh Padgham observes, "It often takes a lot of effort to have less than more. I actually spend more time pruning stuff down than adding things. Doing so can often require a musician to learn or evolve an altogether different part to be played. Every song is different, but I'm always looking for ways to simplify and reduce." Here's another paragraph that I thought was interesting. Once again, less is more. "Given how easy it is now to put 15 plugins on a track in most DAWs, overprocessing is an ever-present hazard for software users. All plugins have side effects, and the less processing you can use to solve a problem, the smoother the final mix is generally going to sound. The thing I've learned," says Justin Niebank, he quotes, "is to do as little as humanly possible, because when the computer has to work that much harder because you've piled on loads of plugins, for example, the sound seems to get smaller and smaller." This paragraph alone has saved me incredible amounts of frustration as a mix engineer. I consider myself to be more of a songwriter-composer. I'm doing these videos for people who want to learn how to mix better. And the other mixing teachers out there, online courses, they don't mention these books because they don't want to look as though they've just learned something or they're relying on some other guru or something. But fact of the matter is, I'm sure all the greatest mixers have these 2 books on their bookshelf. Going back to this one example again, I'd like to just say that, when I applied this to my own mixing, Brauerizing, for example, the hell out of mixes where you put layers of subgroups and subgroups into frequency groups and all this stuff, that can drive you nuts if you're not one of the best. I mean, if you're Michael Brauer, you can do it. Or if you're Dave Pensato, or if you're Bob Clearmountain, you understand how Brauerizing can work. But if you're not on that level of being a mix engineer, Brauerizing can destroy your mix. And I've experienced that myself. But once I started to apply a streamlined minimalist philosophy, as outlined by this book, for example, I became a much better mixer, and my songs started to sound better and less confusing, less brittle. It's absolutely true. The less you put on top of things, layers upon layers of subgroups and subgroups, all the way up to the 2-bus, plugins upon plugins, the more you throw on it, you think it sounds better. It don't. So check it out. This is very valuable material. Sometimes you need to know how to prune it back down, how to scale it back down. And I think that is just as much the secret of great mixing and production than anything else. I mean, once again, I go back to Al Schmidt. You should check out a video from Al Schmidt on puremix.net. It's a great instructional experience, learning from one of the masters. Everybody looks back in the old days and say, oh, what do they know about digital technology? That's a lot of BS, because those guys knew how to get clarity out of their mixes and out of their performances. And when you listen to an Al Schmidt, Frank Sinatra album, or any of the jazz stuff or George Benson stuff he's done, it is clear as day. The instruments are truly authentic sounding. And that's the kind of stuff that I think we're missing today. So in conclusion, these books are highly recommended. I think they're essential reading, practical material for all levels, but particularly for the intermediate to advanced mixers out there. So full disclosure here, I've got links for these 2 books underneath this video, and they're affiliate links to Amazon. So if you purchase it, I get like a sliver of, what is it, like $1 or $2 if you bought the book. But I believe that, if you spend the time to put together a product review such as this, and you do a good job, and, you've actually used it and you like it, you should recommend it. And that's what I'm doing. These books are not that expensive, but the amount of information and the quality of the information is just outstanding value. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be doing another product review in the coming weeks about a very good mixing engineer video course that I recommend. Now, I've taken at least 7 high quality mixing and production video courses, and they're all very, very good. I try to do reviews for products that I totally believe in, and in some cases, if I totally don't like a product, then I will try to share that experience also with you. So in the coming weeks, I'm going to have that product review as well. And finally, if you enjoy this video, I'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe, because that'll give me an incentive to do more videos like this. And I'd also like to highlight that I'll be coming out with some more songs this summer as well. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.